Something that I do maybe a bit more than the average person is check out new guitars or check out guitars in general. I guess for the channel, it's part of what I do to make videos and have an excuse to play guitar. But I wanted to kind of talk about what I think is important for me and try and remind myself of things that I should check when I first try guitar. So like the most important things to check when buying a new guitar. Oftentimes, if we've walked into a guitar shop and all that stuff, most of this is kind of set against you. What I think is really important is time and spending time with the guitar. You know, we do have this thing people call a honeymoon period where our heart and our whatever wins over our head, where we're kind of making decisions based on our eyes and all that sort of stuff. And maybe if you really want to like a guitar in the moment, you can kind of force yourself to think, yes, that will be fine. Versus if you've thought a bit more about it, you could kind of rationalize things a bit. So in terms of making rational decisions, that's what I wanted to try and talk about. So for me, number one, you want to get it playing through something that you're familiar with. This seems super obvious, but it's actually not that easy in an actual guitar shop. So for me, my rig generally is the HX Stomp or the Helix. So for me, when I'm evaluating a guitar, that's why you see me play the way that I do with new guitars, because I'm trying to see, can I do what I do with this guitar? Or is there something hindering me? Is there something getting in the way? Is there something I don't like about it? Tip one, play through something familiar. Obviously, you know, if you're a Princeton player or something like that, or a deluxe reverb player, if you have a pedal board that you use, if you have a pick that you use, all of this stuff, try and keep some of those variables the same so you actually know what it is that you're playing and you've got a point of reference that you can kind of compare it to. You know, normally I use this guitar through this rig and these are the results I get. When I'm playing this guitar that I may or may not buy, I've tried it and these are the results I get. Sort of like a baseline, kind of, right? The next most important thing for me is the fretwork, and a bad fret job can literally break a guitar. A good fret job is not as immediately obvious, but I guess what you want is to not notice the fret job, especially. So when you run your hand up and down the neck in this kind of fashion, you're looking out for sharp fret ends. So these are the things that kind of make a guitar uncomfortable when you play it for any amount of time. So running your hand up and down the neck in this way, and you're sort of feeling to see if there's any friction or kind of cutting on the side of your hands. Now, things that could cause this might be just a dodgy fret job in general, or fret sprout. So fret sprout is when there are changes in climate and the wood shrinks around the frets, and then obviously, so frets, you kind of sand them down, but if the wood is contracted, you get a bit of the material from the frets kind of pointing past that wood, and it can get really uncomfortable. The other thing is to check the bevel of the fret edges. That's another area where if that's not kind of rounded off nicely, you can feel like there's sharp fret edges there as well. The next thing, and this is not as easy to kind of check out for, but I think people talk about dead frets and stuff. The thing to look out for is any kind of frets where the notes are not ringing out. So the cause of this will be a fret that's either been filed too much, bumping up next to a fret which is not filed as much. So you get a thing where the fret that you're playing is going to be below the next fret, so your note starts to choke out, or you can't get that note lower. So you do see this sometimes around this area on the fretboard as well. So just check for that sort of stuff. So an incorrectly cut nut could be the cause of this, or a high fret or low fret, or in general, if the action is too low, that could kind of expose some of these issues on the fretboard. The other thing to check though, because this won't be obvious, if the action on the guitar is fairly high, then a lot of these kind of fret issues can be kind of masked, and it might only become an issue if you're a guy who has like low action and you start to lower things, and then there's a point where it might become more obvious that there's some issues on the fretboard and it might need additional work. Talking of nuts, the test that you probably should have done before all of this is to tune up the guitar. What I like to do for this is kind of tune each individual string, and it may or may not have new strings on it, right? So you kind of tune it to where it's going to be, and then I give it like a tug like that to kind of take slack out of the string and check that it's not getting stuck in the nut. So sometimes with some guitars, as you pull this, you'll hear like a little ping as it pulls back through the nut. Okay, and then what you're kind of paying attention to as you play the guitar is, does it keep its tune well? And if not, why not? You know, is it because you're doing a bend? What I might do is more bending than usual, because like I found with the PRS Silver Skies, that had both of those that I played had a tendency to break the E string, so I'd be bending a little bit more than usual. And then just periodically, as you're playing the guitar, go back and kind of retune, try and notice what's happening. You know, is it keeping its tune okay? Or are there strings that are slipping? So string slipping is not always a sign that there's an issue with the tuning pegs or anything. It can be that whoever's put the strings on has not done a secure job of getting them on. That's something that used to happen to me a lot when I used to make string changes. You'd find like string slippage. So it doesn't necessarily mean the guitar's junk or anything. It could be a mixture of factors. You're looking for, as you're playing, kind of just making sure that, so this kind of thing can be quite a good systematic way to check for dead frets. And also checking around the nut. That things aren't super sharp when you play around here. So if you've got a high nut, you might find that playing chords like a C major or a G major or any of these, you'll get like a sharp sound down here because the nut's too high and it ends up being that this fret technically is too far away then from the nut. Or if it's too low, you'll get like buzzing and stuff like that. Talking of intonation, you know, check around up here. What I like to do is play chords that have, in E major, that have a mixture of open strings and fretted strings. And that gives you a good indication about whether the guitar is intonated well. Because again, you'll know, because if this kind of upper part of the chord sounds super sharp relative to the open strings, you'll know that the intonation is a little off. Or if it's flat, likewise, you'll know. When you're doing this sort of thing, you could be listening for kind of sympathetic buzzes and all that sort of stuff as well. Then maybe give yourself a bit of gain and check kind of whether the volume knobs are noisy or whatever. You maybe take off the noise gate for this kind of thing if you've got one on, and check whether the switches are making noise. Now, none of this stuff would be a deal breaker for me because it's stuff which is fairly cheap and easy to fix. but it's just stuff you want to make sure, you know, and can you get to each of the pickup positions? You know, so you're just checking, I guess, for like crackling pots or incorrectly fitted switches where you can't actually access. So sometimes if this has taken a knock, you might not be able to get to some of the positions on the selector switch. Beyond that, what I'd be also looking at, so sometimes on any kind of level, I've seen this on a PRS guitar that I used to own, Epiphone guitars, check for this nut and how this is looking like it's been fitted, because this seems to be the area that people or companies get wrong on a bunch of guitars. So like sometimes the nut will be, slot for the nut might have been cut really weirdly or something, or it might have a shim in there, or the nut might be kind of off axis or something. That's one area where you can, I guess you'd want that nut, if possible, to be perfectly seated. And that's one thing which at any kind of price range guitar you can see dodgy jobs done, dodgy nut jobs. Beyond that, what I'd be looking for, if I've already bought the guitar and I'm not bonding with it, I'd be looking for kind of imperfections and is there anything actually wrong with the guitar, like paint wise and stuff, because you know you've got consumer rights if you bought the guitar new, and if you don't get on with it for any reason, there's no reason that you shouldn't send it back, especially if there are imperfections. Little things that you can find, like on this guitar, there's like kind of bits of sloppiness around the paint job, just around the neck joint. I guess that would be fairly common. Or excessive tooling marks, you might be looking for something like that. Or I guess as well, looking for dents and chips in the guitar, that could make sense, especially if you're thinking, right, I want to send this thing back because I'm not getting on with it. If all of the playing stuff kind of works out for you though, the next kind of thing that I think you've got to do is actually just try the guitar. Maybe also try the guitar standing up, because sitting down and standing up, things can feel a bit different. Then the next thing that is actually going to tell you whether you get on with the guitar or not is time. So I've been playing this guitar, only this guitar, for the last couple of days, and I'm finding that the left hand kind of is feeling like this is a really good fret job. The thing that you find with guitars that you don't necessarily get on with so much is that you probably won't necessarily want to play it as much as a guitar that you're really enjoying. Your left hand might get more tired, or you might start to feel uncomfortable, like if there are kind of sharp fret edges, that might be a factor. So just kind of pay attention to that sort of thing, I guess. Things that I think to look for when buying a guitar. Weight is certainly a factor as well. So if you're looking for a light guitar, then think about that as you're playing it. Obviously in the moment, your head might not win and you might think, right, this doesn't actually feel that heavy. But if you wanted specifically a light guitar, then make sure that you're actually happy with the weight before you make that decision. Also, it can be sort of hard to gauge weight of certain guitars because it feels different. So like a slimmer neck kind of ends up feeling a bit heavier for some reason when you pick it up, is what I found. Whereas a fat neck can kind of, it feels like it's a bit lighter because you've got like a bigger surface area to pick the thing up from. But yeah, just try and maybe compare it to another guitar or something in the shop or whatever as you do it, if you don't have access to scales, which I'm presuming most of you won't in a shop. Those are the things that I think are important when buying a guitar. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, the things you check. Do you have certain like tunes that you play or anything? But the most important thing for me is that I then kind of start to try and create music on the actual thing and see if that happens. And if that doesn't happen, and if I don't pick it up, then there must be a reason why I'm not picking it up. So in the first kind of couple of days with the guitar, just notice, you know, am I wanting to actually pick up that guitar? Am I reaching for something else? That's how you can know whether that guitar is really going to work for you longer term. I think for me, the PRS DGT that you might have seen sat in the cupboard unused for many, many months, and that's how I knew basically that guitar, I don't need that guitar anymore, right? I'm not going to play it, I'm not going to miss it. So let me know your thoughts in the comments. How do you make these decisions? Any tips for anyone? And I'll catch you in another video soon. Cheers.